All right. Just a little bit about me, first of all. My name's Lee Orphan. I've been traveling to Cuba for about 15 years, pretty much every winter. And I've led 8 tours across Cuba. So, I've pretty much covered every part of the island on a bike tour. And today, as I said, the main focus of today is to talk about the Colonial Cities tour and the Gringo Viejo tour, and to answer questions. That's sort of my main purpose. And once we get to the Q&A part, people just can jump in with whatever questions you've got for me. Now, let's see if I can achieve the miracle of getting the presentation to load. As I say, today's the main focus is of the presentation is the Colonial Cities and Beaches tour. It also goes by the name Cayo Seis Ciudades, which means something fairly similar, beaches and 6 cities. Oh, just that group. There's some of my friends from previous tours. That's at the top of American Hill near Vinales. Bicycle Breeze is the name of the tour company that I work with. I don't work for them. I'm not an employee, but I help the company to organize the tours and bring groups together. And then on the tour, I'm sort of the main liaison between the staff and the clients. Um, Bicycle Breeze has been in business. I've been saying over 20 years for a few years now. It's pretty close to 25 years. Peter and Anna are the primaries. Peter's the one that began the company. Anna's his wife. They live in Havana. I'm going to be at their house by Wednesday, so I'll be with them for a couple of weeks before the first tour, which begins January 25th, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, the tours are aimed at being for all riders, riders of all ages. We do that. We accommodate people of different abilities because some people that want to ride faster, usually I send the tour guide with that person and make sure that they're supported and don't make a missed turn. I usually ride somewhere around the middle of the group, and we let people ride whatever pace they want. The tour bus, which follows us all day, stays behind the last rider, and the bike mechanic Ioanni usually rides with that person. And that's how we keep it together. Every 20 kilometers or so, we regroup. There's bottled water on the bus, so we can fill people's water bottles and to the extent and hand out snacks and make sure people are supported. People will put on some fresh sunscreen, perhaps. All of the tours include some cycling, some sightseeing, walks, hikes, always a bit of beach time. The beach time might seem a bit frivolous, but it's really nice to have a beach day in the middle of the tour. The tours are fully supported. So from the time you land in Cuba, Anna will manage logistics and help organize getting people to the first hotel or casa. Casa is the sort of the name for a bed and breakfast in Cuba. So we use a mixture of hotels and casas. Um, we have a really nice tour bus that follows us. I mentioned the Cuban cultural tour guide. So Corral Pupo will be our guide again this year for the 3 tours I'm doing. Me as the tour leader, Ioanni, who we like to call the best bike mechanic in Cuba, and of course the bus driver. I'll get to the prices at the end, but the prices include all accommodations and most meals. The only meals that we don't include are some of the lunches when we're cycling, and it's just, we'll either eat a box lunch or find something along the way. Part of the thing that's really neat about Bicycle Breeze is Peter has worked and created this network of youth cycling clubs across Cuba. That's a picture of Peter and some young women from the Las Tunas Cycling Club from a few years ago. We will meet at least one youth cycling club on each tour. The clubs themselves are connected to provincial schools. In Cuba, they have these schools which provide sports training along with regular education. And they're dependent on tourists like us to bring them bikes and bring them tires and spare parts to keep them going. It's not a mandatory thing at all to bring things to donate to the cycling clubs, but we encourage it because people usually like to do this. It's best to just talk to your friends, go to some local bike shops, dig through your basement and see what you've got. Anything is appreciated. Tires are the main thing, tires and tubes and things that wear out. It's also worth bringing non-cycling donations too and handing them out along the road. I think pretty much everyone that goes to Cuba ends up bringing donations with them. So the focus today is the Colonial Cities tour, and it begins and ends in Havana. That red line, we follow it in a counterclockwise manner. So leave Havana, head down to the south coast, up to the north coast at Cayo Santa Maria, and then return to Havana. I'll show you a few slides in a minute that show the route in a slightly more detail. It's a really beautiful route. This road, this one's got some of the best roads in Cuba, good pavement and not very busy. So as I said, we begin this tour in Havana. There's some of the classic cars, photo I took a few years ago. When we're in Havana, we will spend a little bit of time and look around, but we're going to come back at the end of the tour and spend more time in Havana. From Havana, we will take the tour bus to Hagway Grande. That's where we're going to have a nice lunch. That's the small tour bus. We use two different sizes of bus depending on how big a group we have. In that case, we keep the seats in one side of the bus and we stack the bikes on the other side of the bus. The bikes stay on the bus in the evening. And then you can also store some of your luggage on the bus. And as I say, the bus follows us and you can hop on, hop off the bus if you want to get sunscreen or water or snacks. So from Hagway Grande, we cycle down to Playa Huron, which is where the failed Bay of Pigs invasion occurred. The photograph is the museum there. It's a really well laid out museum, very detailed in terms of the battle itself. And there's I don't know what to say, a cute newsreel video from back in the day produced by the Cuban government describing their version of the invasion. It's a pretty accurate version, but it's a newsreel and it's pretty entertaining to watch. We cycle from Playa Huron to Cienfuegos, 100 Fires. That's a view of the town square from the rooftop bar at the hotel we usually stay at. It's a beautiful town, really clean streets, and you can walk down to the waterfront. Trinidad is the next stop, known as the Pearl of the South. It's just spectacularly beautiful. It has cobblestone streets in several places. That's the main square there. We'll spend 2 days in Trinidad. One day we'll be walking around town for a few hours. The other day we'll either cycle or take the bus to Playa Ancon, which is a beautiful white sand beach on the Caribbean. From there, we'll cycle up into the Escambray Mountains. They're low mountains. It's a hilly ride, but I wouldn't really call it a mountainous ride. That's Lake Hanabini in the background. It's a reservoir. When we're there, we'll be there for 2 nights. On the second day, we're there to the right of that photo, that little hillside with the trees. We'll do a hike. I think it's like 5 to 8 kilometer hike through the mountains. We'll see some really neat birds. Last time I was there, we saw a tocoroco, which is the Cuban national bird. As we come down out of that mountain and down to the lake, we'll take a boat and take the boat across the lake to a lovely restaurant, have a nice couple of hours at a restaurant, have a nice meal, and come back to the hotel in the afternoon. From Lake Hanabinillo, we will cycle into Santa Clara, which is famous for where Che Guevara attacked an armored train, effectively ending the revolution because Batista fled the country later that day or the next morning. Really pretty town, certainly a great place to see. We'll see Che's mausoleum while we're there. It's very elaborate. We'll cycle from there to Remedios, which is a pretty little colonial town. That's part of the square in Remedios, and there's some nice restaurants and bars to spend some time at. From Remedios, we will cycle to Caibarien, where we'll hop on the bus and take the causeway to Cayo Santa Maria, where we'll spend 2 nights. Another chance to spend a day on the beach or to do some cycling around in the vicinity. Cayo Santa Maria, the Cuban cultural tour guide Corral tells me that Cubans consider it the best beach in Cuba. The sand is like white flour. When you walk in it, your feet sink in, 2, 3, 4 inches sometimes. It's really pretty. When we leave Cayo Santa Maria, we'll take the bus to a town called Colon, named after Christopher Columbus, and we cycle from Colon to Matanzas. It's a fairly long ride. I think that's about a 90-kilometer ride, but we had a wonderful tailwind the last time I did it. From Matanzas, we'll hop on the bus and travel into Havana. That's the Capitol building in Havana, which is modeled after the US Capitol. And while we're there, we will on the next day do a ride along the Malecon in a classic car, and we'll do a walk in town and check out the beautiful Havana Vieja, the old town. So that was that loop, and I'll really briefly now go over the other route, Gringo Viejo. So the one I just went over is in February. This one is March 8th to 20th. The map here is actually the map of the Fat Mary tour, so it's not the same one. This route, Gringo Viejo, which is a 13-day tour instead of a 15-day tour, begins and ends in Havana. So so we'll fly or travel into Havana to begin the tour. We'll be there for 2 nights. We'll do a classic car ride on the first day and a bike ride out to Playa Baracoa and visit Fusterlandia, which is a really pretty building made up of multicolored clay tiles. It's quite funky. From Havana, we will go to Mariel and see a cycling club there before we cycle on to Las Terrazas, which is an eco park on the edge of the Sierra Rosario mountain range. And we'll spend 2 nights there so that we can do a walk on the El Contito trail, which is a really pretty trail with some diverse climate. That whole mountain range, in fact, it's sort of surprising the first time you go there because we think of Cuba as being tropical and palm trees, but this area is pine trees and quite temperate. So daytime highs might be, 22 to 24 degrees, much cooler than other parts. From Las Terrazas, we will cycle to San Diego de los Baños, which is named after the mineral spring there. I enjoy going to the mineral spring. It's like a little hospital building, and you get a treatment in the mineral spa, and they even give you a certificate when you're done. And on the way to San Diego, we'll go to Cueva de las Portales, which is the caves where Che Guevara established his headquarters during the Cuban Missile Crisis. From San Diego, we will go to Vinales, which is famous for growing tobacco and producing cigars. We will have a lovely dinner at an eco farm where it's a farm to fork meal. On the second day that we're in Vinales, we will cycle up to the north coast over a low ridge to Cayo Judias, where another beautiful beach awaits. We'll cycle there. It's a really nice ride. It's actually a dirt road, but it's hard packed and it's more or less like asphalt. We'll travel from Vinales to Pinar del Rio, which really is the center of tobacco, of cigar production. There's some large factories there, and we often stop and visit the cigar factory. We finish the cycling by riding to Maria La Gorda at the far western tip of Cuba. We spend 2 nights there, and on the second day that we're there, there's an option to either cycle along the coast or to do a beach day and snorkel. And in the past, when possible, we've rented or chartered a boat and gone snorkeling on the reefs. And then finally, we take the bus and return to Havana. where we do a walking tour. So that's the Gringo Viejo route. Just to summarize the tours in general, typical cycling distance is 25 to 100 kilometers, so 15 to 60 miles. 10 cycling days for the 15-day tours, 8 cycling days for the 13-day tour. The roads are generally quiet. If we're coming out of Havana, for example, we'll take the bus and avoid the busy roads using the bus and then cycle from there. There can be hills and rolling countryside. Reasonable level of fitness is recommended. The road surfaces are highly variable. They can be really good, like just as good as anything we would see in North America, but often they'll be potholed and occasionally there'll be some gravel. So the main thing to deal with that is to use slightly wider tires. All of the bikes, the rental bikes, have 28 millimeters, so inch and a half, inch and a quarter tires. That works really well on the roads. There's bike rentals available for a fee, including e-bikes. The most common rental is a hybrid. Probably 60, 70, 80% of people will rent a hybrid. And the price is, I think, $15 a day for the hybrids. The other options like gravel bikes or touring bikes are around $30. The e-bike, I can't remember if it's 30 or 35. E-bikes are becoming very popular. We always have a couple of e-bikes on each tour. I mentioned the fully supported aspect and what's included in the tour price. The airfare is not included because people come from all over the world to do the tours. So that's a separate factor. There's the prices for the 3 tours that I'm leading this year. Those prices are per person, double occupancy. If you're traveling single, the single supplement is 300 or 350, depending on the tour. So thank you. Again, my name's Lee Orphan. I'd love it if everyone could stay in touch. There's my email address and the company website. It'd be great if everyone could send me an email, or at the end of this presentation, if you could take the time to share your email with me so we can stay in touch. That would be really appreciated. All right. So there. All right. So I hope that gave everyone a sense of the tours that I'm leading this year. As I said earlier, the first 3 tours of the season are already full, but these last 2, Colonial Cities and Gringo Viejo, still have spaces. So we've had some more people join us. Welcome. See David, Paul Mason. Anyway, so at this point, I'll just turn it over to the group and just any questions you've got, just pop them on the table and I'll do my best to answer. And as I mentioned earlier, for people that might have not been with us at the beginning, the time for the presentation runs out after 40 minutes. So if we run out of time, what will happen is that the screen will go blank and just dial back in on the same Zoom meeting invitation, and you'll pop right back in and we can resume any questions people have. Okay, so who wants to go first?
Is the flight included in the cost that is written there?
No.
No, because people come from all over the world, so the prices, can be highly variable.
Click on him. I don't know why we still on. See if
It lights up whenever I'm talking.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Linda.
How many people are typically in a group? Like when you say it's full, how many people is that?
Yeah, the 10 is the minimum, and we max out at 20. Sometimes we'll end up with 21 or so, but 20 is what we consider the maximum. So the bus that I showed on the one slide, that's the smaller bus. So if we're a group of 10 or 12, maybe 14, we'd go the smaller bus. With a larger group, it's sort of a double-decker bus. Not really double-decker, but there's a compartment under the bus where the bikes go, and then the whole upper floor is just seating space. So we use that if it's 14 to 20 people.
If on any of those riding days you're not feeling up to doing the distance, can you sit on the bus for a while?
Yes, the bus is there. Sometimes someone might bring a spouse who just rides the bus
Mm.
uh, alone. I mean, as their only option, they don't cycle at all. But often someone will take, they'll be tired. They say, I've had enough. I'd like a rest day. Um, the bus is air conditioned. It's got a fridge. I stock it with beer. Beer is very inexpensive in Cuba right now. It's less than $1 US a can. So,
Drink
so
a
you
bit.
have a couple of cases of beer available, so everyone can have a beer after the ride.
Lee, do you recommend bringing a prescription of antibiotics with you?
I've never seen anybody need it. Um, Having said that, you'll have a hard time sourcing antibiotics. I have a bottle of antibiotics I got in Spain a few years ago, and I
Yeah.
just take it with me whenever I travel. I've never used it, but I take that for sure, just as if you got some nasty infection, at least you've got something to take. The other
Right.
thing I definitely would take is Imodium.
Imodium.
Um, it's when you find yourself in a hot climate, uh, eating lots of fruit and vegetables that you might not be used to, swimming in the ocean. It's not at all unusual to get what people call traveler's diarrhea. Imodium clears it up immediately. I just automatically take 4 or 5 tablets, and within 20 minutes, I'm fine. But yeah, definitely bring Imodium.
Okay. The other thing you recommended as a gift or a donation was acetaminophen. Do you bring little bottles of that, or how do you bring that?
Yeah, it's much more economical to go to Costco and get the big jug of acetaminophen. I can't remember how many you get, about 500 tablets or something. Um, for that, for example, you might go to a doctor's office in a small town and hand it to the doctor, and then they
Okay.
can spread it out. Or if you have the bottle with you and you bring some little lunch baggies, people will want to know what you're giving them. So if you take the bottle and you just like shake 50 pills into a baggie, they'll give you a big
Yeah.
hug. There's a real shortage of for the Cubans, not for us, but for the Cubans, for things like acetaminophen. So they're very keen to get that.
Okay.
Oh, someone is it Linda the Ducrawl? Um, I used Ducrawl once and had the worst experience I've ever had with traveler's diarrhea, so I've given up on Ducrawl personally. But I'm not saying that if people want to take Ducrawl, that's certainly an option. I think it's not available in America. I think it's a Canadian thing. So sorry, Americans.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's is it a vaccine or a liquid that you take? I can't remember.
It's an oral vaccine. You stir a powder into water and you take it about a week or two before travel.
That's it. Yeah, it was a few years ago I did it. I shouldn't have poo-pooed it. It might work. For me, it didn't. But yeah, for sure, definitely some people take Ducarol. And Michelle, you've raised your hand. That's very polite. Shoot.
The Canadian. I wrote them in the wrote them in the chat. Wrote them in the chat as well, but maybe just to share. Couple of questions. One is, I guess I'm wondering, should we be concerned about infrastructure issues in Cuba? I mean, I gather the Cubans are very resourceful, so I've been telling myself that it's probably okay. That's one question. The food rationing, is that something we should be concerned about? And then I guess my third question would be the bicycles themselves. If we're going to rent the hybrids, are they? I mean, I'm not, it doesn't have to be a $10,000 bicycle, but are they, pretty decent bikes as far as the quality goes?
Okay, that's 3 questions. I'm gonna have to really try hard to remember them all. So the first one I think was like really about electricity, I assume. So that's been in the media a lot. Um, for me, I mean, for sure it's an issue. So the issue's been pretty much the same for as long as maybe 5 or 10 years, that there's been essentially Cuba doesn't produce enough electricity to provide the whole grid. They've really electrified, like a lot of the cars and motorbikes are electric. So they're using a lot of electricity, and demand supply hasn't kept up with demand. So they manage that through managed blackouts. So there's a website that Cubans go to, and it says, you in your neighborhood, we're going to turn off the power from 10 in the morning till 12. So you'll definitely see these 2 to 3 hour blackout periods from time to time as we move around Cuba. I just consider it an inconvenience, but you know, it's a thing for sure. There was the complete grid failure back in, I think it was October, and that took them 2 or 3 days to recover from. But you know, hopefully that's improved. I mean, not likely to happen again. Food I consider kind of overblown. During COVID, it was like I've been traveling there throughout COVID. I don't think I even missed a year, maybe, I can't remember. And there was definitely, you know, you'd go to a restaurant and there'd be two or three choices on the menu. But the bike tours that have operated already, the two that have already been completed, they're finding the food situations really good. I'm not going to say it's as good as Canada or America, but you're going to get lots of choice. Might see days, for some reason, eggs seem to be a thing. So often at breakfast, there won't be eggs, and that definitely upsets people. I like to have an egg for breakfast, so I get that. But I think the food situation's pretty overblown. I'll be honest. I think it's not a big deal. What I have recommended for the last 2 or 3 years is if people like to have a lot of meat protein while they're cycling, like in the middle of a day, because we can't guarantee what we can find for lunch. A lot of people bring some tinned meat, some chicken or tuna or sardines or something, and just have that as a snack in the middle of the day or the middle of the ride. Personally, I don't need that, but a lot of people like it, and that's a great option. And then the third question was the bike. So Carell, who works for the Cuban tourism industry, has told me he considers the Bicycle Breeze rental bikes the best ones in Cuba.